Welcome back to the Panic Room, guys. And this is our third book review. So today we're going to be talking about the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I'll put a picture of it right here. So I know that these book reviews kind of get a little long-winded, so I'm actually going to scrap what we've been doing, where I have to go chapter by chapter, and just see if I can keep this to a non-rambling 20 minutes. We'll see if I succeed. Let's start out with just a general overview. No spoilers yet, but they are coming, just be forewarned. So, general overview, when I first picked up this book, I didn't know what to expect, really. It looked a little cheesy, but I'm all for cheesy horror. Hey, I'm for that. And the fact that it had vampire in the title, yes please. They're one of my favorite horror movie villains, creatures, whatever you want to call them, in most of their incarnations. I'm not much for the zombie-like vampire. I'll try to put a picture of it here so you kind of know what I'm talking about. That's not really my cup of tea, but it's probably because I'm not a big zombie fan. The book is amazing, I have to say. I enjoyed every single page. As somebody who grew up in the 90s, I really appreciated some of the nostalgia. When he's talking about like Patricia's outfit or Kitty's outfit, I could see my mom wearing these things in the 90s, So yeah, I loved some of the nostalgia that was in the book. As somebody who also comes from the South, the descriptions of the heat and the way that the people talk, that really took me back. I have to say I loved that. But don't get me wrong, this was not totally a feel-good book. It definitely had its points in it. And those were very eloquently executed to the point of, it made you kind of want to gag a little bit, but then you were just like, what the crap, where did that come from, So it kept you reading. Patricia, our main character, is very, very relatable. And you kind of see yourself going on this ride with her, because you're in her head the whole time, pretty much. But then, it's kind of like a Golden Girls or a Sex and the City thing with her book club, because you see elements of yourself in each one of the characters, and I love that. I love those things. There's a reason I think that those shows are so popular. So yeah, I have to say that it was very eloquently done. I loved the book. I loved pretty much all of the characters. Either I love them or I love to hate them. And I really thought that the take on, vampire lore was really interesting too. Because he wasn't your cut and dry Dracula, right? And if you're on this channel and you're watching this video, I'm assuming that you like to read. So there's an element of that in there too about people who love to read and how they would kind of, attack a situation like the slaying of a vampire. And it's exactly what you think. They take a lot of different elements and, there's a lot of different personalities at play. And it comes together beautifully. Absolutely beautifully. And if you are a lover of horror and you don't mind a little blood, I think you would absolutely adore this book. The one thing that I kept thinking, and if you watch my review of this book, my little review blog, I think I say this more than once. When I picture, Kitty and Grace and Patricia, everybody in the book club, I got the mental image of all the women from the Edward Scissorhands movie. I mean, if you read that book, did you get that? Comment down below, let me know. Because I could see them. I could see them in the Technicolor outfits. I could see them carrying the dishes. At one point, one of them even makes ambrosia salad. Come on. I mean, the connection is clear. I feel like Grady, the author, had to have had some of that. Just a little bit of a sprinkle of some Edward Scissorhands in the back of his head. So, in an effort, again, to keep this video short, let's get into some spoilers and some discussions of some of the scenes in the book. The first thing that popped out to me was, just the way Patricia was laid out. She's a little bit older than I am in the book, and, she's married, she's got kids, and you see her have this craving for something more. She's kind of sick of the small town mom life, and, cue Belle running through the field here. So yeah, I mean, I think we can all sort of, I think we've all been there. So yeah, I think we've all been there. You know, we've all been like a little humdrum at points in our life, and we just want to shake it up and get some excitement. And you wouldn't think that a book club would be the way to do that, but it turns out it is. So by just happenstance, these ladies all get together, and they're so sick of their town's normal book club that they sort of get their own, and they start to read all these novels, like, you know, illicit novels, so to speak. And it's not really anything hugely bad. It's mostly revolves around like true crime and things like that. There's a couple like, I don't know, dime store romance novel kind of things thrown in there, but then they start to read things like Dracula and, you know, all these novels that aren't deemed proper, I guess, for a woman to read. As a matter of fact, there's one character named Slick. She's an interesting one. She's like the religious one of the group, and she has to tell her husband that she's at a Bible study. But, you know, again, going back to the whole thing about how these shows that have these different female characters, sort of each one representing a part of you or a part of a woman as a whole, you see that. You know, we have our character like Grace. You know, she's like the perfect mom and wife. Her house is immaculate. She's the best at everything. You know, we all have that side of us, that we know we're good at something, right? Then there's the character of Slick, and, you know, she is the prim, the proper, stick to tradition, religious side of us, and we all have that. So you see what I'm getting at here. So I love how when we get to, as we go through the book, because the book spans about 4 years, I want to say, I love how we get to know each one of these characters. You know, I want to say, I think it's Kitty, the one that she always describes what she's wearing, and it's always like flamboyant and sequined, you know? Like, I think we've met some people like that in our lives, if you've lived any amount of time. So I have to say I really loved that. And we're seeing the book through Patricia's eyes. So you see the struggles as a mom to keep up this like perfect facade of parenthood and this perfect wife, you know, as the guy goes off to work and she stays home. And there's a lot in the book. Tell me what you guys thought of this. There's a lot in the book about like, well, you just stay home all day, you know, how busy can you be? And any of you who have ever stayed home, kept a house, had children, been a stay-at-home mom or dad, no judgment here, you know plenty to keep your ass busy if you're doing what you're supposed to, I guess. So I think it's funny that there's that disconnect that you see, and it's sort of there with all of the men and women in this story, you know, where the men are the providers, which, again, no shame. They're the ones that allow the women to, you know, do what they can do in the story. You know, they have the free time to do what they need to do. So, you know, they serve their purpose too. But I do think that the dynamic that you see between them is very interesting, especially if you've either been in a long-term relationship or been married. It's kind of interesting to see that give and take, that back and forth. And on the side of motherhood, you know, we see her very concerned as the years go by, as her kids become teenagers, you know, about their attitudes and things that are happening. Of course, there's a little bit more macabre there than what a normal teenager would go through, but it is interesting to see it from Patricia's mother vision, so to speak. So let's talk about why we all actually pick up with this book. The vampire, James Harris. So James is the danger that Patricia's wanting in her life. You know, he knocks on the door, she invites her in, she's super intrigued with him right off the bat, and yeah, he sort of like comes in like a whirlwind to this town. He gets there because his great aunt has passed away, and there's a whole scene with the great aunt. Holy crap. This is probably our first real, like, what you would call horror scene in the book. What did you all think? Like, I gagged. I straight up gagged when she's eating the raccoon. So gross, but such a good scene. And she attacks Patricia, bites off a piece of her ear. I mean, so we get kind of shoved into the horror with that scene, but you know, James kind of comes in and he starts just kind of everybody getting under his thumb. You know, the men are intrigued with him, and you see that Patricia's helping him out because he has this disorder that he can't go out to the sun because he got bit by a dog and it did something to his pupils, and it's a very involved story. But you know what? I was like, it got me thinking, like, what would a vampire tell people? Like, as his reason for not doing some of the things that a vampire can't do. So Patricia helps him out, sets him up a bank account, all this stuff. And then you just start to see, like, she starts to spiral. Totally spiral. And at first you're thinking like, okay, she's taking care of a mother-in-law. We all know how hard it is to be a caregiver, on top of the fact that she's a mom and a housewife and all of this. So when she first starts to suspect something's wrong, I have to say I was like, maybe she's just a little stressed. You know, maybe we're not there in the story yet. Obviously, as readers, we are privileged to have like a knowing of what the story was probably going to progress like, but I was really thinking like some of it might just be in her head at this point. So we get to this absolutely horrific scene with rats, and me being the dunce that I am, you know, I love vampire lore. It never occurred to me, I totally forgot that Dracula, vampires, can control animals. You know, but my first thought was bats, you know, but I forgot that in Dracula lore and vampire lore, they can do things like spiders and wolves and rodents. And boy, this scene with the rats, they set it up really well because it's sprinkled throughout the beginning of the book about how they're having these problems with like water rats. But then when the rats descend on Patricia's house and straight up like try to eat the mother-in-law, the aging mother-in-law, whoa. And the nurse barely escaping into the bathroom, and the poor dog. I'm that person that you can kill anybody in the movie but don't touch the dog. Yeah, the poor dog. But he makes it, so we're good. I was happy to see that. And the nurse makes it. I pretty much knew. I mean, the mother-in-law was very old and she has dementia, you know, but she is an important clue. Actually, she becomes even more important as the book goes on. What did you guys think about that? Where she had that mad rambling about Hoyt Pickens and how he stole a bunch of money from her mom. I knew as soon as she got killed, I was like, she was right about the picture. Because she kept screaming that she had a picture of Hoyt Pickens every time she saw James, our vampire, show up. So I was like, she's probably old enough, because I want to say she's like in her 80s or 90s in the book's present day. And I was like, she's probably old enough to remember the last time this vampire came through here. So no wonder he wanted to kill her. We sort of see, you know, I'm thinking like, okay, Patricia's going to be a little bit better now. She doesn't have, you know, this caregiving responsibility. But then it sort of all breaks loose. Like she tries to convince the book club. And what did you think? Would you have believed her? Because she starts down this whole path about how he sells drugs to try to get them to help her and all this. I can't say I blame him for not believing her. I think she made a mistake lying right off the bat, because she straight up saw James in the back of that van. And what was up with the way he like bites people? It was very insect-like. Like she's talking about this like tube coming up and out of his throat or the bottom of his mouth. That was different than a lot of vampire lore. What did you think about that? Let me know down below, because I kind of got a more alien-esque kind of a deal from that, even later on in the book when he, you know, is meeting his end and he's talking about how he has eternal life and there's nobody like him on the face of the planet. And it makes me wonder, like, is he a vampire in the strictest sense of the word? Because some of the other things that happen with him, like the whole deal with Slick, you know, trigger warning here, people, you know, when he assaulted Slick, you know, that was kind of out of left field for me, because I feel like and tell me if I'm wrong, I feel like in most vampire lore, there can't be squeak squeak relations, so to speak, because of the whole like I'm dead thing. So there was that. And also the one thing that takes me off about this book, after Slick was assaulted, she's in the hospital. You know, she was a very like demure woman anyway. So I feel like she wasn't gonna, I knew kind of she wasn't gonna survive this. But she's talking about how like she can feel something growing inside her. And I was like, oh, he totally made her pregnant. He got her pregnant. And it's alluded to, you know, he even says like, oh, I left a surprise with your friend Slick. And she even says, you know, oh, it's waiting for me to die. And at the end of the book, when she's passed away, it's just left. It's just there. Did I miss something? Is there a part two? Because I haven't researched anything about this book. I didn't want to see any spoilers. I didn't want to know anything before we talked about it. We see a couple of years down the road, you know, the whole thing about, oh, he's on drugs, and Patricia tries to get her book club after him. You know, it kind of blows up in her face. The men confront her, tell her that she's crazy, and again, trigger warning, you know, she tries to take herself out. And I have to say I feel sorry for her, you know, but she convinces herself that she was just at a bad place and tries to get along. And everybody's doing so well, right? Everybody's got all this money and it's all because of James. You know, he's brought this, this, and this into everybody's life. And nobody seems to make the connection with what the dead mother-in-law was saying about how this Hoyt Pickens shows up and did the same thing. Because she tells this story, even in her Alzheimer's addled brain, she had this story straight about how this Hoyt guy shows up, everybody starts to financially benefit, and then poof, he's just gone. And the same thing starts to happen in our present day in the book. But then simultaneously with this, we see like this poorer section of town and all these children going missing or committing suicide because they have met, I think they call it the boogeyman or the booger man in the woods. And so Patricia all this time had thought it was James, but she's trying to convince herself that she was just crazy. So we find out that she starts to slowly kind of come back thinking that James is doing something because it's starting to happen to kids in her town now. And she's worried about her children. So again, she starts to try to get her book club, but they're kind of distancing themselves from her because of what she did before and how everybody's husband got mad. And, you know, they're doing really well financially now and they don't want to do anything, you know, to mess with their wallet, right? She finally gets, I think it's Kitty, and the nurse, she's now a housekeeper, who is cleaning James's house to let her in. And she starts to look around James's house thinking like, okay, if I don't find anything, I'll let it go. If I do, then I have a case, right? So we get what is probably the scariest scene for me. When she's in the attic, she finds the dead body of what used to be the housekeeper for James's great aunt who died, the one that attacked her with the raccoon guts. That scene where she's trying to hide from him, oh my gosh, it makes me cringe just thinking about it. Okay, I'm not the greatest when it comes to spiders. Okay? I'm just not. I respect them for what they are. I think they can be very beautiful, but I don't really want them near me. Okay? So that whole scene where she's like crawling under the dirty blankets to try to hide from James, which I have to say was kind of dumb because I was like, okay, he's a vampire. He could probably smell you from 2 floors down, right? So I'm thinking he's just messing with her. But boy, do we it's so descriptive and it makes me have chills, but I'm like, it's still good writing. It's such good writing. I feel like when you emotionally react to a story, that's proof positive that it's good. But what did you think of the cockroach? If you've read this book, you're gonna know what I'm talking about. The cockroach in her ear? I'm pretty sure it was a cockroach. Yeah, I think it was a cockroach. I'm so traumatized by the book. Talking about how it's squeezing down her ear canal and she has to keep hiding, like she can't move to get it because he's right there. And at the last second, she has to like do this number and like squish it in her ear so it won't go down. So scary. It makes me want to like tear up my earrings. What did you think? Like, that was horrible. It was so bad. It was like body horror. I hated that and I loved it all at the same time. So of course she finds the body. She gets this master plan to put the driver's license of the dead woman on him somehow. She ends up putting it in his car, which he finds. I mean, I feel like vampires are one of those things, like you're gonna have to work super hard to get something over on them because they've seen it all 5 times because they've lived for forever, right? We get this massive finale in his house because he's built this giant McMansion that they called it, and they end up dismembering him. A bunch of 30-something-year-old Southern ladies end up dismembering him. And I personally loved Grace in this scene. Grace is the prim and proper one, which you find out that she has some domestic violence going on in her life, which is close to home for me and very tragic. There's a lot in this book that will really bring it down to earth, I guess to say. But I love Grace. I think that she is a go-getter and she gets things done. And when they dismember this guy, there's blood everywhere, right? Just everywhere. And Grace shows up and the first thing she says is, am I too late? And she starts talking to the nurse, now housekeeper woman. And they start talking about like the best way to get blood out of carpet. And it's just, it is the most wonderful juxtaposition with this dismembering of a body that just happened that I have ever seen. Amazing. Absolutely loved it. But you get a lot of that in this book. At the end, Patricia's divorced. Her kids choose to live with her, even though her husband gets to keep all the money in the house. So we see that, she really was a good mom, even though she spends the majority of the book second-guessing herself. I feel like most moms do. I feel like every parent, moms, dads, everyone, I feel like that's just par for the course with parenting. So we see her at the cemetery visiting Slick, and she puts, the book they're reading on her grave with a glass of wine, like she's still a member of the book club, which I thought was very sweet. And you find out that they had put the pieces of the vampire, not his head was different, in this mausoleum kind of thing. And she thinks she can still hear them moving because, the body parts are moving. And I just got a picture of, it scurrying by. She thinks she hears movement in the mausoleum, which I thought was kind of creepy. I thought that was kind of cool. And yeah, that's sort of our end. It's kind of a happy ending. But again, we get this whole gaping maw of what happened with this baby that he left with Slick. Was it a baby? What the crap? What the hell, man? I need to know. Final thoughts. I absolutely adored this book. Grady Hendrix, I have looked up some of his other work, the author, and I really think that you're going to see a lot of him on this channel because if his other works are anything like this, I'm going to thoroughly enjoy them. I think that if you are considering reading this book, or if you have read this book, let me know. Are you a fan of this cheesy horror nostalgia? I think Amazon, when I was looking up this book, Amazon had a wonderful blurb that said this book was Still Magnolias meets Dracula. And I think that is ideal. If you liked the women in Still Magnolias, that pastel horror of Edward Scissorhands, you're gonna love this book. I'm really looking forward to more works by Grady Hendrix, honestly. So guys, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Tell me, did you read this book? Have you read anything by Grady Hendrix? Let me know down below. Thank you for coming to this book review, guys. Please like, subscribe. It would really help me out. And I'll see you next time in the Panic Room. Bye for now.